are recording, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Then I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. McKee here, Bodema excused, Nichols,
Here.
Schultz,
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Okay, and now the work session topic is the compensation philosophy in comparable cities. And Brad, I believe you're going to walk us through that.
Sure, thanks, Mayor and Council. And Jess, I do have a couple of slides as far as the walkthrough, but big picture as far as our compensation for the city of Corcoran, we use a step and grade system. So the grading is generally the difficulty of the job, and that varies from physical effort to mental effort to your ability to impact the organization, those types of things. And then we go from grade 1 to grade 20. And then we have steps within those grades on compensation for starting up to 1 year, 2 year, 3 year type information there. And our structure is really set up for satisfactory job performance. If you're doing your job, everything you should be doing, you move forward in that step process, unless the city council were to freeze pay increases. So for example, if Corcoran's economy would have been terrible as possible, that might have been an option for the council. We're going to freeze wages, no longer go on the steps. We just have to save all the money we can. That also happened back in the day when LGA was cut from cities. So the council does have 100% authority of those, but in a normal year, that's how that works. And I can go more into that as well. And I know Councilmember Schultz asked a little bit more about the system we have, and I do have a slide related to that. Alan, if you're interested later on too. But this is really a follow from the April work session on staff planning. And really the next step we felt as a staff would be to establish a peer group to compare our wages. And there's all sorts of data you can look at. We talked about in the past, whether it's budget or tax capacity or anything else. But really the items that came down from the staff perspective of what's comparable were four things. The range of population, similar in nature. We're not comparing. We're not in a peer group with Plymouth, for example, nor Hanover. The geographic location makes them a likely competitor of ours. So you'll notice that these are really kind of West Metro communities. We thought it was important to have a growing community nature to it. So for us that we could kind of track together. So every 2 years we wanted to find a different peer group. These are cities that are growing like we are, so we should be able to maintain them. Maybe we peel off one and put a new one on in the future. And then finally, the complexity of the organization being similar in nature. Just because you have a similar size population doesn't mean it's complex. If you have a city that's 6,000 people right now with nothing going on, that's a little different than a community of 6,000 where we're having hundreds of acres platted a year and all sorts of challenges that a growing city has. And other items as well. So for example, Wayzata is recommended in the peer group, and they're not growing as fast as Corcoran, certainly, but they have a pretty complex downtown area, business districts, those types of things and different challenges, the lakefront and that way too. So that's kind of the factors we looked at, and we can have as much conversation on that as you want there too. Next slide, please. So this is our recommended peer group. It's 8 cities. There's no magic number to 8. It just felt like there was a bigger gap below and above this group. So it was kind of a natural selection in my mind. So you see Corcoran kind of highlighted on the map. And then this is just alphabetical. Carver, they're experiencing really fast growth as well, as is Dayton. Medina being our neighbor to the south. Minnetrista, a fast growing community as well. Large in size too. Orono. Rogers, our neighbor to the north, Victoria, and Wayzata. So those are the 8 groups, and this map just shows where they are geographically. Next slide, please. So as far as some of the information, I kind of peeled this off of the packet and narrowed it down to those cities. Councilmember Schultz asked for throwing tax capacity in, so I generated that. I will note that the Carver County cities, Victoria and Carver, that's net tax capacity, not total tax capacity, but the numbers are really close. I just couldn't find a 2021 number for net, so I had to use their or for total, so I had to use their net, but their previous year net and total is really, really similar. So it's small increment, but I want to make that note there.
Net,
Again, the population.
sorry, can you interrupt? Can you explain the difference between the net and the gross?
Yeah, so it really comes down to fiscal disparities. So you'll have your total tax capacity, and then you have to pay into fiscal disparities and then get credit back. And some communities are losers and winners on tax capacity. So Corcoran, most of these cities are actually about straight even. But for example, Bloomington's net tax capacity is 30 million less than their gross tax capacity. So it's a big number there.
Okay.
So it's really just fiscal disparities, how that plays out.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. And then geographic size, that's just something of interest, I believe. The fast growing community, just a check in the box there, as I note there, wise, that is really not, they have a lot going on otherwise. And then distance to Minneapolis for another factor of just we're not comparing to a city that's 50 miles out, because that plays in as well. So I think the next slide is just really teeing up the conversation. Jess, can I go there? So really just direction, any adjustments to the peer group, any additional items you would like us to review. When we're moving forward with reviewing these communities, it's obviously going to be salary, it's going to be benefits, including PTO and short-term disability, long-term disability, those types of things. And then just overall thoughts you have on a philosophy within this group. I think I mentioned in my report, I think this is not an overly reaching group. And if we want to have, kind of the best staff we can, I'd like to see us, above the midway point in this group, I guess is my own belief, to get the best and the brightest, but I don't know how you feel about that. So with that, I guess I'll stop talking. I'll take any questions. I do have that one slide regarding our grading system, if you want me to walk through that at some point as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brad. And one quick note I just got from Jessica that John is on the call. I believe he's on one of the call-in numbers. I don't know if you can unmute John or if you're just hearing us, but just wanted to let everyone know, and I'll open it up for anyone's initial thoughts on this. I guess specifically on the list of 8 cities, and where are we in terms of thinking if those are the right fits, if there's anything we'd like to change, add, remove, where everyone is on that.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, good deal. Any outliers on that list that stand out to anyone as not being a good fit? I kind of like personally how there's several I see that are potentially good fits for different reasons, and I think it gives us a good range of data to look at. Obviously some right on our border, and some kind of further away and of similar size, but varies in size and how they're growing. So I think it's a good list. But just wanted to get the council's take on any particular cities you'd like to see added or removed.
I would tend to agree. I mean, there's no perfect list because all these cities are unique in some way. So I think you probably got a pretty good list here.
I'm okay with the list. I would just note a lot of them are bordering Lake Minnetonka, and I'm not sure if that's going to tend to skew the results in any way, given that we don't have the same natural amenities as they do. But I'm not sure if that bears primarily on the revenue side, with us having a lower tax capacity, or more on having a different mix of employees. But I don't have any reason to reject any of them. I'm perfectly willing to accept the 8 that are proposed.
Okay.
Well, that might be one thought when we look at it, is it's not hard to get a sample set of knowing if your employees live in your community.
Yeah, that'd be valuable information. Any other thoughts on that particular aspect of the list? John or Manoj? Otherwise, I think
I find it to be acceptable.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm not hearing anything from Manoj. I'm hoping that means he's on board with it. So in regards to that, Brad, I think we've got a list of 8 there to go forward with. Then kind of to the second part of Brad's questions and presentation. Is there anything in kind of the analysis itself of those 8 cities that we'd that we want to make sure is in there that hasn't already been discussed, or something that we don't want included in that, kind of in the philosophy side of things?
I think they would make I think we probably are likely to compete with this cluster of cities for talent to join the Corcoran team. And I guess that kind of feeds back into the previous questions, even though they might not be totally apples to apples. If we're looking to hire a set of building inspectors or a cadre of planners or whatever we need to keep up with the growth that we're experiencing, the faster growing cities in this area will be the ones that we're competing with. So I think it's important that we are competitive with that group. So I would say midpoint for sure. Potentially slightly above, especially if we think that with a particular role, we have the ability to drive longer term cost savings if you can have a really talented person who can set up a system that is cheaper to operate longer term, then that person is definitely worth the extra investment.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I mean, obviously without seeing the numbers, it's hard to say specifically, but I think as an overall philosophy, trying to aim for the middle to higher end of that middle of that group would be a good target in theory, and I'd like to see us potentially aim for there, obviously depending on what the actual specific data comes back as, but that's kind of in line with what I was thinking as well, Brad. So I think, Jeremy, you're in that same boat. Alan, John, or Manoj?
My thoughts are is we want to be competitive. So what competitive means when we get to it, I guess, is where it's going to fall, because it might not be all monetary. There might be some additional benefits and whatnot that separate us out. So it'll have to be a kind of a full package type view. One thing that I hope we look at is when we look at these different cities, we look at their actual compensation structure, not only pay, but is there a different compensation structure between the different departments or something to that effect? Administration versus something that's more unionized. We tend to follow what our police union contract is here. So it'd be interesting to know how different cities approach these plans, not just where we're paying our people in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. That would be very important to have that data.
So, Manoj here. So again, I think it's a good set of comparable cities, right? Especially with the capacities and what we're trying to do and who we kind of get pit against when we're trying to hire. With respect to our philosophy, I've traditionally not liked one size fits all approach where we say we want to be competitive in all positions. So I would want to see by role responsibilities, RJDs for those positions, compare those to what's happening there and decide which are the ones that we like. It's an 80-20 rule. So 20% of your staff is what drives the best, drives the rest of the organization, right? It's for most organizations. Again, I could get challenged with the public-private sector discussion on this one because I kind of get tapped on that for a lot. But I love our start. I would want to see more data to decide are there specific positions we want to be competitive on and certain not, right? So and where is our biggest needs in our growth? If there will be sectors within Corcoran, we are like that area of our department is going to be super critical. So let's just go heavy on it versus not. So I would not do across the board as a philosophy, but the start is great. Just looking for the next set of information that we can use.
Gotcha. And I think some of that kind of goes along with what you were saying, right? With seeing how each city does different departments and not having a one size fits all for everything necessarily.
Yeah, well, one size fits all might be the best approach in the end.
Right.
It depends what we get
What we
out of
find
it for
out.
information. We just don't know any different right now in a public sector setting. You know, we all have experience in private sector compensation, but you can't necessarily equate the two. They're not the same. So
Absolutely. And which is why I said, like, it might end up being, let's just be competitive across the board, or not be competitive across the board. But right now, I don't have enough information to give that kind of a broad guidance. But I like the start so far. And once we get more data, we can look at it.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So to display my current understanding, in private sector, you've got a salary range and people tend to fall within some kind of a band. I understand we can't do it the same way in public because of equity. And it's difficult to show equity for following that kind of a system where it's not as strictly controlled. My question is following up on Manoj's point that certain roles are going to be more critical in their overall impact. And Brad, you mentioned that in your introduction. I imagine then one of the ways that you would have some flexibility for the roles that we really want to have excellent performance in would be in the job description, and talking more in the job description about that organizational impact and leadership responsibility and mentoring other people. Is that already in place, or is that something we need to be doing as part of this review?
I would say both. And Jessica, do you want to go with the final slide and like looking at this true site system that might be helpful? It is already in place in that we capture that. And I'll jump to this slide here. So we use the true site job evaluation system. And there's different categories. So there's qualifications, decision-making, problem solving, relationships, effort, hazards, and environment. So I just cherry pick decision-making, for example. And on the left-hand side on the top, it starts with follows instructions and is subject to close supervision. So that type of position doesn't have to do a whole lot of decision-making that has impact on the organization, still will grade really low on that. Down to the bottom where you're formulating strategic direction and keeping the overall organization where it needs to be. Completely different there. And then you kind of rank this. So we have the system. One thing I don't think we probably haven't done well enough is capturing that in the job descriptions. We've updated nearly all the job descriptions since I've been here, but I don't think we've really done a great job encapsulating exactly the stresses or levels of the job. Additionally, if you go to qualifications, for example, that category, I don't have it, Jessica, so it's just this one here. That talks about your experience and education needed to even obtain this job. And a lot of our jobs have, I would call them lower base level qualifications and their minimum requirements. And we have a lot in desired qualifications that you don't get credit for because you don't have to have those to have the job. It's what we'd ideally want, but we don't pay for it. So I think that's an area that could be developed for those more strategic positions. Matt and Jessica have master's degrees, for example. They don't, and which brings a ton to the table, but they don't get credit for that. I don't think mine is in requirements either, actually.
Sorry, I'm just kind of reading through all of this.
And I'll shoot, George Gamak is the person who runs the system. He has done this for many, many years for many organizations, large organizations. I actually worked with him in Winstead when I was working out there previously. And he was kind enough to share a 20-page document with us, and I'll send that out tomorrow so you guys can look through it at your leisure.
That'd be great.
Very good.
Perfect. All right, well then, is there anything else, Brad, that you need from us in terms of direction today?
I guess technically not, but if it's okay, since it's been so quick, I guess I'd like to open it up whether Jessica, Matt, or Kevin have any things that I'm missing the ball on that you'd like to ask the council too, if that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor.
Of course.
No, I think you hit most of it, Brad. Police ends up being a really unique, you'll find out kind of as we get into it, because with different cities, the way it's structured, the way they, some communities have contracts with with their counties. So there's a really broad range of how they work. And then also, our city is so different and we have such different requirements. That's not always the same. So for instance, we have a public works director who's also an engineer. There's not a lot of cities where their public works director is also an engineer, and he's kind of doing double duty. So he's, we gain value from that. Public safety director means a lot of different things in different communities. None of these, their public safety director doesn't have anything to do with fire in any of the other cities where, obviously we have fire planning and logistics, same thing with emergency management. So public safety has some really dramatic differences throughout communities. And I know that, there's always considerations on any of the positions, but we do things obviously in the interest of trying to combine and, for good governance, try and get the best value we can out of our employees. So if we want to continue being successful, I think we need to make sure we at least account for that, at least in the soft ways that we can, and make sure that we keep that in mind. So that's the biggest thing from the police end of it.
I think from an administrative and like Matt said, each community is a bit different in how they approach different things. So just keeping that in mind. And with our growth, just keeping that in mind as we move forward.
And Kevin here, I echo what pretty much everyone said in this conversation. So it, I think I appreciate the council's willingness to review this. I thank you for that, and we'll help pull together whatever resources you need to make a good decision.
Sounds good. Thank you. Is there any other questions for Brad or any of staff from council here?
No, I had, Mayor, can I make a statement?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, absolutely. I think Kevin, as a council or any organization, you should always keep looking at if your team is happy and they want to be there, and are you doing enough to keep them around, right? And some of the discussions, as you guys, it's an open meeting, as you hear us deliberate, some of it may not be our willingness to pay more or not. It might be what we can afford to pay more or not, right? So as long as you understand that some of this deliberations we are doing is not personal, it's more about can the city sustain it, right? Even though our great employees, we want to keep them around forever, right? They retire, have them retire here. But keep that in mind as you listen to us deliberate. And it's less about, hey, I don't think he deserves it. It's more about, I think I can't afford it, right?
Thanks, Mayor and Council. I agree 100%. And the other side of this, I think that's helpful for you all is when you're out in the community and get asked, why do we pay so-and-so X? And right now, we don't have that really answer that we can say, well, we have a peer group and our goal is to pay somewhere on this level of that peer group. And we studied it. And every year we reach out to the peer group and re-juggle where we're at and make decisions based upon that. And I think that's a really good answer for you to be able to have in the community too.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Or it's more. I've been through multiple hirings as a city council, and oftentimes we're presented with, well, this is what we could do if X. This is what we could do here. And sometimes it's an expression of frustration where I need a direction on where we're looking to hire. And sometimes it's, do we want somebody that's inexpensive and on the front end of their career? Do we want somebody who we feel might work here for 10 years? Do we feel like we want somebody very expensive that will do a very top-notch job? And it's not always about comparing the role with the same role in the neighborhood and what we pay. And I think, Brad, you've got a pretty good idea of where we want to have the pay discussion and where we want to pay. But I think I just want to hear it articulated by you, real world circumstances where, like we've articulated this this is what's going to come into play. And what I want to have too is like stability in this decision. So it's, yeah, we're not going to be the cheapest people when it comes to hiring people, and it sounds like we're also not going to be the most expensive. So there's going to be give and take with these decisions that we make tonight. We don't want to sit and revisit this every time there's a hire, in my opinion. So I guess I want to hear from Brad if this gives you enough. It's been an expression of frustration historically because of the lack of direction in hiring by the city council. And is this sufficient for you? And where is it going to be meaningful?
I think it is sufficient, Mayor and Council. And I guess I'll clarify my frustration in the past is usually around budget time when it gets to be grumble, why do we pay employees this much? And they say, well, if we had a compensation philosophy, I could tell you that. And we know what we're doing. So that's typically my frustration a little bit. And that's not because, anyway, that's for a variety of factors, what I should say. But the next step will be the hardest part of that, actually developing the structure to achieve picking what we want to achieve, which I'll have some recommendations. I do agree that there's certain positions we want to have retaining for long as possible. Not that we don't want everyone to stay here and retire, but there certainly are some big things. I know, me being here for nearly 8 years, I know a lot about the city, and I'm able to shape things completely different than I had by being here for 3 years, just because I know all the ins and outs of the city. And same thing for Jessica and Matt and Kevin. And then, different tiers of that throughout the organization. So I hear what you're saying. On top of that, I think there needs to be, maybe we can't pay the best, but we want to make sure we have a work-life blend and balance. So we have a PTO type system that offers that type of lifestyle. So you can make sure you have time with your family. So I think it's a blend that I'm certainly going to need some pretty significant direction from the council. But my goal would be to bring some scenarios to you. So versus asking an open-ended question, what's important to you? Maybe bring, okay, here's a pay structure for focusing on salary. Here's a pay structure that focuses more on a mixture of benefits and salary. And here's one where maybe lower salary, but higher benefits, and the pros and cons to each of those. So I will need a lot more direction in the future. Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, I was wondering where this is all going. And it seems like there is enough information for you to go on, and I guess I'm eager to see the next step. What does this mean then?
Let me ask a question. Sorry. I wanted to ask a question off John's question. So I've heard a lot about in the past, our philosophy was, well, hire young and pay them cheap and work them and see if they stick, So my question is when you come to us with a budget request for a new hire for a new position, let's say we're hiring a city planner, which we did. You bring us a budget number, which the expected budget impact. Are you bringing us a number at a new person hire, a mid-range person? How are you bringing us a budget number currently that we market positions to for attracting people that we want?
That's a good question. So when we do a hire, we do a position profile. So right now we have a finance manager position out there as well as maintenance worker position out there. So, and a couple of years ago, we as the internal leadership team developed our core values as a team and our ability to have these profiles so we can help share who we are and who the person we want beyond just the salary range. And I think that's actually been pretty effective for attracting the people we want in this organization. But with that, we do have from top end to top, or from low end to top end, here's the wage range for this position, and generally state that depends on qualifications. So when it comes down to the hire specifically, we'll have the preferred candidate, we'll look where they're at, we'll confirm that information with their employer. Generally, unless there's a good reason, it's really hard to ask somebody to take a pay cut. So then you kind of fit them where they are in the pay scale. It's been harder as of late with some of the hires With Natalie at the planner level, we got, I'd say, a little lucky in that, you know, she was in a administrative assistant role within a planning department and wasn't compensated all that well because of it. So because of that, we were able to start her at the start position. You know, if somebody's coming in, a police officer, others, we're probably having to start pretty close to that mid-range. And then unfortunately, they're at the top of the scale in a couple of years and then likely looking again. So that's the unfortunate part about that. But there's no secret system to it. It's just trying to put them where they closely are in a wage already, not getting a pay cut, and then going from there.
Okay, so they stay in the range and then there's the scale within the range. So if they meet X, they can bump up in scale and bump up in pay, right?
To a top level, and there's no more. And then, now we apply a escalator every year, whether it's 2%.
Cost of living. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, to keep up with the marketplace. But eventually your position is you pay what you have and that's all you get.
Right. Okay. It's good to know.
Anything else? Okay, and hearing nothing else. Brad, you have everything you need?
I do.
this step?
I do. Thank you very much. What we'll be doing is putting together a questionnaire of sorts that'll kind of ask what any and all information we need from people, and then we'll send these out to these communities, and it'll probably take a month or two to pull this all together. So probably something late summer to bring it back, or summer, I should say.
Sounds good. Perfect. Thank you very much. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Thomas.
Second.
Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма,
Aye.
Nichols,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Alrighty, thanks guys. I will see you in 55 minutes. Got
Sounds
some
good.
time.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.